ASEAN Daily. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene and you are listening to DurianASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. Today we have a lot of news to report to you regarding on Southeast Asia. But before that, a bit of an update of a breaking news happened yesterday, which we saw a bunch of Myanmar students during a protest against the national education law. We saw that Myanmar students were having a clash with the police. In fact, the baton-wielding Myanmar police beaten students, activists, and they broke up another protest for education reform. In fact, the demonstrators, including young activists, monks, scattered through the streets in the central town of Letpadan when hundreds of riot police dispersed the protests, lashing out as they moved to block streets. Student protests have embarked on months of demonstrations calling for education reform. As you all know, the new education law, if it's being passed by the parliament in Naypyidaw, we will foresee a law that would probably curtail the academic freedoms and students' freedom of expression in universities and other higher in other education institutions. So anyway, students have been embarking this for months and months and has been going throughout Myanmar from villages to cities, and recently they tried to go through Yangon to protest in the capital city for the education reform. But plans by a core group to march to Yangon has been halted by the police near a monastery in the dusty central town of Lepadan, which was surrounded by around 150 activists from March 2. If you look at the pictures, a lot of the students now are being caught and arrested, and in fact we are not sure the fate of the student, but the authority in Myanmar is definitely cracking down on the voices of the students. We have never seen this happening before for quite some time, since the military regime have promised for a reform in this nation of Myanmar. But recently, it seems that the government has somehow changed its voices and not be able to compromise with the students on the issue regarding on the education reform that was requested by the student leaders. In fact, the student leaders have provided an 11-point reform, which includes academic freedoms and the rights to form unions, as well as other forms of freedom of expression that they hope to be able to instill in university, and in a way to increase the quality of education, not just in terms of academic quality, but also in terms of the way the students are being allowed to think critically on issues. And in this case, it seems that the students are definitely facing a huge battleground where the Myanmar government seems not to be able to compromise on the particular issue. Going back to another country, Singapore. Well, Singapore is defending its vandal punishment. So how can Singapore, of all countries, say caning is humane? Well, the reality is Singapore is the strictest country in Southeast Asia when it comes to enforcing the law, and caning is nothing unique about it, because if you remember a couple of decades ago, where an American kid who created a bit of truancy has somehow been charged with cane in the past, and which created a huge diplomatic row between the US and Singapore. That was in the past, but now Singapore is still defending a court order for 2 German men to be caned for spray painting in a metro train and trespassing into a high security depot, rejecting claims the punishment amount to torture. So it seems that Singapore hasn't really changed post Lee Kuan Yew, and they are still implying that very Confucius way of dealing with people who have created truancy in Singapore, in a way that if you have done something wrong, you should be caned and you should learn from it. Definitely it will not sit well with countries that view torture and punishment such as caning as a form of as a form of against human rights and human dignity itself. Another story in Singapore is the first Singapore patent recognized in Cambodia, IPOS. So apparently the first Singapore patent have been granted protection and recognized in Cambodia less than 2 months after the signing in the Memorandum of Understanding between the Intellectual Property Office of Singapore, IPOS, and Cambodia's Ministry of Industry and Handicrafts. IPOS said that the recognition of the patent granted, which was a few days ago on March 4, reaffirms Singapore's search and examination capability as the country prepares to become ASEAN's first fully operational international searching authority and international preliminary examine authority by September 2015 under the Patent Cooperation Treaty. So that means that Singapore is definitely moving forward to be recognized as one of the leading country in terms of upholding intellectual property rights. Talking about Singapore again, it seems like the senior ministry, Cham Prasid, actually is quite happy with it. In fact, he said that this is a momentous moment in the history of intellectual property cooperation between Cambodia and Singapore. The arrangement is an embodiment of ASEAN integration, no doubt about it, and greater harmonization in the region to allow businesses to enjoy expedited patents protection. These are some forms of the non-tariff barriers that I think a lot of the governments in Southeast Asia are trying to eliminate, but it takes time because a lot of these agreements are bilateral, as what we see between Cambodia and Singapore. But at the same time, it's definitely taking place in a way that all countries of Southeast Asia are understanding how important it is to remove non-tariff barriers in order for business to be able to fully function all over this region. So we will take one short break. When we return, we will talk about the South China Sea and other news affected this Southeast Asian region.
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene.
Good morning, this is Grace.
And of course, continuing our discussion. So Grace, earlier on, we've been discussing news about Singapore and about Myanmar. So we are moving to Southeast Asia's South China Sea.
Right.
As you all know, we have been reporting about this over and over again. But it seems like South China Sea is not going to be solved anytime soon. In fact, recently being reported in a lot of the news channel that China is in fact challenging ASEAN with its landfills in South China Sea. Talking about landfills, if you really look at the aerial map of the South China Sea, you could see that China is actively building islands and building ports for its own interests on the South China Sea.
And at the same time, like you mentioned before, yes, definitely they're really challenging ASEAN now, Southeast Asia, and its 10 member countries we are talking about here regarding South China Sea. And then this sort of implementation, perhaps China just sort of announced this to public just to make sure that they still have power to take this China Sea's matter. But then implementation, meaning how they are going to execute this plan, we never know how it's going to be like, because that means China will be fighting against the 10 member states.
Yes, that's true. So in this case, there are at least 4 major man-made structures that have been erected. Namely Itu Govan Johnson South and Fiery Cross reefs with the supply platforms, communications, gun emplacements and docking facilities installed alongside artificial islands over the winter months. Wow, that's a complete
Sure, yes.
it's a complete island where South China, artificial islands that that China has already foreseen they are going to be in control of. But one question that is still looming, all of this information was in fact being revealed not by ASEAN, but by this organization called CSIS in Washington. So it shows that the US is really looking at the South China Sea geopolitical problem as their own problem as well.
And then they are putting as one of their concerns as well. But not only from USA, but then regarding this matter, Philippines and also Vietnam has come up with their own legal actions. So for example, the Philippines has taken sort of the legal action against this China, or we call it China's ambitious plan, and then to say that the law of the sea and its navy is also adding 2 more warship to its fleet to counter this Chinese government increasingly assertive maritime ambitions.
Yeah, in fact, what they are foreseeing right now, especially seas near the Philippines, is that China, or Beijing in this case, is definitely progressing faster than what is being anticipated by the US. In fact, they are going further than any other claimant. It seems that ASEAN also is having a very slow and probably not non-productive discussion with China, as what the DOC is supposed to facilitate dialogue. DOC is the declaration of conduct between China and ASEAN among the member states. But what it seems to be like, all this dialogue is being halted and confrontation by China is escalating in something. In fact, it is going into something that is really worsening in these coming months. Even since last year, we already see China has been stopping boats by fishermen, and they have been really putting on threats towards people who have encroached themselves in the South China Sea. You saw that in Vietnam and in the Philippines. I don't think anytime soon Beijing would be backing out. In fact, I think China's policy right now in South China Sea, they really see this as their own territory.
And at the same time, just to add top of that, China is gaining more power and they're getting stronger and stronger when it comes to military capabilities as well. I mean, if you compare ASEAN to China, still it's very obvious that military capabilities is still way stronger, way powerful than the other states in ASEAN. And it's unlikely that, like, for example, the Philippines and Vietnam, even if they raise the voice towards the China Sea, how they are going to defeat against the China. And at the same time, Singapore, Thailand, Myanmar, and Laos have not backed a united approach to China over this matter. And it looks like Cambodia has openly sided with Beijing.
Wow. Actually, talking about countries within Southeast Asia, people always assume we are united, but in reality, not so, especially in terms of foreign policy. You are right that Cambodia is siding China on this, especially when Cambodia don't really have any stake or interest towards the South China Sea. But countries like the Philippines and Vietnam, they are starting to be closer to the US because they see that the US is the bigger brother. But the reality is, if you are talking about China, the way they deal with international relations is bilateral. So that is what they are requesting, not towards a dialogue with ASEAN as a whole, but bilaterally with countries that are affected in the South China Sea. So in this case, they are expecting to have a dialogue with the Philippines and with Vietnam separately in silos. To them, this is the best way forward in order for them to resolve the territorial disputes involving the Spratly on Paracels and also on other seas and other areas in the South China Sea.
And also, if ASEAN is not united, as in to solve these issues regarding South China Sea, China in the future, sooner or later, they will take advantage of ASEAN's these divisions.
Aren't they taking advantage already?
Yes, already. But then sooner or later, it's going to take advantage even more.
Yeah. So on the other hand, we focus on another news. This time in, if I'm not mistaken, in Malaysia, it would be, in Singapore, it would be the wage increase for lower wage civil servants. This is according to the Deputy Prime Minister, Teo Chee Hean. He said that by next month, about 2,200 lower wage civil servants will receive a salary increase between 60 Sing dollar to 80 Sing dollar. How do you view this? Because to me, it's still not enough. I think the wage increase is quite low, considering Singapore is the most expensive city in the world, especially in the recent survey by the Economic Unit Intelligence. And at the same time, the high cost of living is definitely hampering the socio-economic condition for the lower wage earner in Singapore.
Right. At the same time, Singapore released their budget 2015 plan as well, and then they wanted to focus more on the lower income group in Singapore. But however, just looking at the figure only, 60 to 80 Sing dollar, it looks like just slight increment. I don't know whether in large amount or large population it will help the people. However, it's still a very small amount. And at the same time, this year's increment followed Public Service Division in a partnership with AUPE, which is Amalgamated Union of Public Employees, and also Ministry of Education on challenges faced by these officers. So according to them, they said this move will keep salaries market competitive as part of their regular review of salaries. And so from next month, which is April, their salary scales will also be lengthened, so the officers who have reached the previous maximum of skills can receive further increment as they uplift their skills.
I'm a bit skeptical on this salary increase, because I think the wage increase is still very much not on par and not competitive enough, even though that was the speech budget for what is being said by Mr. Teo. Because if you look at some of the elements that they were talking about, for example, both degree holders and non-degree holders will be recruited on and progress along the extended management executive shim, which is great. But at the same time, you're looking at dollars and cents, and in terms of dollars and cents, nothing much has changed. An increase with $20 Sing dollars is actually quite low. I remember going to Singapore and going around the area. At least it would take you more than 100 Sing dollar just to do like simple sightseeing. You're not even talking about like real adventure, spending money in Singapore.
But I don't know what's the actually the story behind the increment in this case, but definitely this is very little increment. And then whether it will motivate all those low income people or not, it's up to the story after they release and see how people react towards this increment.
Yes, definitely. And on another news is about the relationship between Japan and Laos. So apparently, as we all know, Japan has been actively eyeing Southeast Asia in terms of forming relationship with ASEAN countries, and Laos is the next best thing. What we see right now is the strategic partnership would definitely benefit both countries, as we see Prime Minister Shinzo Abe visiting Laotian counterparts Tongsin Tamavong, I hope I pronounced it rightly, by elevating their relationship to a strategic partnership following the talks on March 6th in Tokyo.
And at the same time, this will be definitely bilateral relationship. And also economically speaking, Japan was Laos' 6th largest export market and also the largest provider of official development assistance. So from there, they definitely Japanese government has has been putting their eyes on this Laos as a part of their potential area to build a relationship between. And then not only investing on the business, they're going to help a lot more regarding the agriculture and other parts in terms of humanitarian assistance as well.
It's interesting to see how Japan is only reaching out to Laos now, because if you look at the history throughout Southeast Asia, a lot of the countries in Southeast Asia have formal relationship with Japan in a strategic partnership, of course. But in this case of Laos, if you look at Laos right in today's Laos, it's still very much a backward country based on agricultural production. And although Laos has this aim of being the energy center for Southeast Asia, it's still very much lacking in terms of skills, resources, education, investment, and trade. And definitely having Japan investing in Laos would be good for Laos. But what is it in for Japan? I think in this case, if I were to look at the Laos vision of being the energy source for the whole of Southeast Asia, definitely Japan would capitalize on that. I think the energy market will be one of the biggest market Laos would be embarking in the coming years, especially post AEC 2015.
Definitely, when you talk about the economical power, Japan is way far apart from Laos, and then there is so much that Japan can give, much more than Laos can give, and Laos will be improved by having Japan with in relation. But then, however, like you mentioned, Laos has energy power, but however, Japan on the other hand has economical, political, security side. They're much stronger.
From Laos, we move to Indonesia. As we all know, the biggest news right now is Indonesia is not economy, although President Jokowi is aiming for the 7% growth that it has promised. But unfortunately, the Bali 9 execution is what is the biggest news from Indonesia that is being reported all over the world. In fact, even among Indonesians, they are unhappy with it, that they are actually protesting and threatening backlash if the Bali 9 executions are cancelled. Oh, that's interesting.
That means the Indonesians have been supporting when it comes to this capital punishment in Indonesia itself.
Yeah, and I remember the hashtag Coin Untuk Australia, where they want to give back or refund back all the monies that Australia has give to Indonesia during the tsunami in 2004. But it seems like what is being seen as an improved relationship between Australia and Indonesia has definitely gone down the drain with this Bali 9 execution. Voices in Indonesia is very divided. I think a lot of people, they are either in support or against the Bali 9 execution. For me personally, I am pro universal human rights. In a case, I think everyone should have the right to live or to life. So just because you created a huge crime in the past doesn't mean you have the right to doesn't mean people have the right to take away your life. Everyone should have the right to live in the kind of life that they aspire to be, even though it might be a life sentence in prison, but they should be able to live.
And it looks like Joko Widodo has been very strict towards the security matter. And then when it comes to Bali 9, he has been very firm and very going forward with his plan. But according to the reports, it says that all these people, they surrounded the embassy, and they say if the government cancels the execution, they will bring down the government. So that's how they are also become very firm towards this
very
plan.
Nationalistic in a way. Things like this shouldn't be a nationalistic issue. It should be a human rights issue. I think the President Jokowi had made a huge mistake of dividing the voices of Indonesia on this particular issue, and the best way forward right now is to realign the issue towards a human rights issue. Actually, tomorrow we'll be interviewing the Indonesia's representative to ICHR, the Human Rights Commission, Intergovernmental Commission to ASEAN, and one of the point that he shared, or he will be sharing, is how it is important to see the issue of Bali Nai as a human rights issue, not a nationalistic issue. Anyway, we'll take one short break. When we return, we will discuss more on what is happening right now in the Philippines as well as ASEAN.
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene.
Good morning, this is Grace.
Okay, we are back again. This time, we are going to talk about what is happening right now in the Philippines. So at least 3 media group has been criticizing the Quezon City Court order giving Endal Ampatuan, senior son and massacre suspect Datu Sajid Islam, temporary freedom. And they are not happy with it because the media are seeing this as one of the challenges that is showing the weakness of the leadership of Aquino as well as the justice system.
And also they've actually expressed their disappointment, and those are all in the separate statements. For example, the National Press Club of the Philippines, the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, and the College Editor Guild of the Philippines. They all were trying to gather more details, but the judge, the Jocelyn, were again resorted to legal technicalities to justify the granting of bail against this Sajid Islam Ampatan, who admitted to being the present, while the details of the massacre is being discussed.
The massacre that we are talking about is the demise of the 44 elite cops. They actually went. Their purpose was just one thing, which is to eliminate or to catch the terrorists. One of the terrorists is Marwan from Malaysia, but unfortunately, instead of them catching the terrorists, they almost all of them, which is 44 of them, were being killed. And this is one of the saddest tragedy in the Philippines right now, and a lot of the media in the Philippines are asking for answers why the court system is not effective enough and why Aquino's leadership has caused such a huge disaster in terms of in terms of Filipinos intelligence unit.
It's very sad to see the leadership in the one country, whereas all those public services want to, and that they're really thirst for the answers and the reply and the communication from the government itself. And that it looks like Malaysia is not the only country, but the Filipino is pretty, because Philippines is quite well known for having the freedom of expression when it comes to media, and that it comes from all those media agencies there. If they have expressed their disappointments towards this,
it's great that the media is putting pressure towards the government and towards the justice system. So hopefully more answers can be get from the Filipinos media on the outcome of the justice system for the issues that they're having with the massacre. On the other news, it's actually not news, just an update before we end before we end our show here, is just an update about Jakarta's flight that ASEAN is granting unlimitedly, which is great, right? Because we are seeing that ASEAN airlines are definitely increasing the aviation industry in order for them to be able to make the ASEAN economic community a reality.
And then this is definitely good news, and it has opened more flight options for travelers to flying within that region. And then this Move Follows campaign is set about 10 years ago to get these 10 ASEAN nations to remove all these restrictions on flight from their countries to push to become the one aviation market.
Yeah. This is another non-tariff barriers that I'm glad that it's being eliminated. But since they are increasing or unlimited flight to Jakarta. Do you want to go to Jakarta?
I would love to visit Jakarta. In fact, I have never been to Jakarta, so I just want to see how the place looks like. But I know it's very commercialized.
It's very commercialized. Jakarta is unique, has a very unique culture on its own, but the problem is macet. Means that it's always in traffic jams.
Yeah, I've heard about it. Perhaps the government really needs to look into improve the infrastructure before they, further and opening the more options for travelers to come in.
So anyway, that's all for our news today. Don't forget to visit Jakarta since ASEAN has signed the deal where all ASEAN airlines will have unlimited flight there. So you can always catch up with us more news on Southeast Asia at our Facebook, Twitter and Instagram.
And also we have a website, DurianASEAN.com. All those contents are there, so please visit our website and leave your feedbacks there.
Mm-hmm.